On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the celebration. When the wine ran out, Jesus' mother said to him, "They don't have any wine." Jesus replied, "Woman, what does that have to do with me? My time hasn't come yet." His mother told the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby were 6 stone water jars used for the Jewish cleansing ritual, each able to hold about 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some from them and take it to the head waiter." And they did. The head waiter tasted the water that had become wine. He didn't know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. The head waiter called the groom and said, "Everyone serves the good wine first. They bring out the second-rate wine only when the guests are drinking freely. You keep the good wine until now." This was the first miraculous sign that Jesus did in Cana of Galilee. He revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him.
Even if you hadn't heard the full story before today, you've probably still heard about Jesus' miracle of turning water into wine. The story is known as the wedding at Cana, and it's one of the most popular stories about Jesus, which I find really interesting because it's only found in the Gospel of John. In this passage, Jesus and his companions are at a wedding, an event that is special, but not unusual. Yet, during what everyone thinks to be a normal wedding, this unbelievable act happens. To help us get a better understanding of this weirdness, we're going to look together more closely at a few of the folks in this story. And I want to start with the first person who speaks, Jesus' mom. John does not give her name here nor in the rest of his gospel, but we know from the Gospels of Matthew and Luke that her name is Mary. Mary's connection to this wedding is unknown. We're not sure if she is a relative of the bride or the groom. Is she a family friend? Is she just there because it's a community event and she's part of the community? We don't even learn whose wedding this is in the first place. But what we do know is that Mary is the one who gets the ball rolling here. Somehow she discovers that the wine has run out. And it sounds like the celebrants still have some partying left in them, and it's going to be a huge bummer with nothing left to drink. The guests might get annoyed, even angry. Running out of wine may also be kind of embarrassing for the bride and the groom because their guests might think that they didn't plan well or care enough about their experience. And so Mary decides to address this problem before it becomes something worse. And she tells her son about it. This move tells us a couple of things. Number one is that Mary cares about other people. She is compassionate and she wants to help out where she can. And number two is that she has a unique relationship with her son. There's something special about him, and she knows it. John does not tell us how she knows this or what exactly she even knows about Jesus. Unlike the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, John's does not include what's called an infancy narrative, which is a shorter story within the bigger story about Jesus' birth. So it's difficult to determine what John actually knew about the relationship between Jesus and his mother Mary. But this move from Mary here shows us that she's at least close enough with Jesus to be familiar with his divine gifts. Mary is an ordinary woman in an ordinary setting. She cannot fix the problem at this wedding on her own. And so she does what she thinks is the best course of action to take. She turns to her son, a person that she knows to be extraordinary, and she invites him to share his extraordinary nature in this moment. At this point in John's gospel, we barely know Jesus. This story opens chapter 2. So we hardly know this guy. The disciples hardly know this guy. They just joined him at the end of chapter 1. So we haven't yet seen what he's capable of. But Mary has. When she tells him the wine is gone, his reaction is, "What does that have to do with me? My time hasn't come yet." So we know he's got a mouth on him, especially with his mother. But beyond the sass, I sense that he harbors some hesitation and is unsure about this. Mary doesn't ask him or tell him to do anything specific. She just informs him that the wine is all out. That's all. But she knows that's all it will take to get him involved in the situation. When Jesus says, "My time hasn't come yet," he indicates that he's never shown off his extraordinary nature in public before. And if he does so now, everyone's perception of him is going to change forever. If he does so now, he won't be able to return to the life that he had before this wedding. This decision, this moment, is major and life-altering. And I understand why he's hesitant to intervene in the problem here, because if he does, there is no going back after this. But Jesus faces this risk. He takes action anyway. Could have held back, could have repressed the extraordinary within himself so nothing would change. But it was more important to him to come to the aid of others. And he addresses an ordinary problem with a fantastic solution, with a miracle. This is the first miracle that Jesus performs here in John's gospel. And it's nothing super serious. It's nothing about healing somebody or saving them from death or even feeding someone who's hungry. And instead of doing this miracle alone, he gets assistance from the servants at this wedding. And like Mary, they too are unnamed in this story. We can assume they're not enjoying the wedding as much as the guests are, since they're technically on the clock. And we can also assume that a lot of folks there aren't paying much attention to the servants, probably not appreciating how much hard work it takes to entertain them. So when Jesus tells the servants to fill up jars with water, they may not think twice about this request, just following orders like they've done all day. Do they expect Jesus to fix the issue of no wine? Do they even know that there's a problem with the wine in the first place? Did they even hear Mary tell him about this issue? The jars were used for washing one's hands before a meal, so the servants probably didn't think someone would drink the water inside. But then Jesus tells the servants, quote, "Draw water from the jars, take it to the head waiter," and they do. And the water they draw from those jars is not water. That ordinary element, essential to our lives, has been transformed into something else entirely. And the servants were part of making this magical thing happen. A spark of the extraordinary, a spark of divinity, broke through this ordinary event on an ordinary evening. No one expected it to happen. Mary didn't anticipate that the wine would run out. Jesus didn't expect to make this incredible thing happen when he arrived at the wedding earlier that day. And the servants probably didn't believe that they would contribute to a miracle like this, at least not while they're at work. But all of these people are important to the story. Jesus, of course, plays a major role here, but the story is not just about him. The other people contribute to this miracle. Mary sets it in motion. The servants prepare the water for Jesus, who then turns it into the wine. Each of them have a necessary role in making this miracle happen. And every day, there is a chance that something extraordinary might pop up in our ordinary lives. We understand this because it is embodied in the sacraments that we do within the church, baptism and communion. Both of these sacraments use everyday elements to remind us of our connection to God. With water, bread, and juice, or wine, we recognize how our normal selves exist in relationship with some kind of phenomenal divinity. The ordinary and the divine, they are not parallel lines that will never meet. They twist and they entangle and they touch all the time. So when we feel like we're stuck or bored in our lives, we're not paying attention to the opportunities for the extraordinary around us. We may be witnesses to it, or, like the characters in this story, we may be the ones who make it happen. Our actions might be big or small, but regardless, they are still significant. It took Mary, Jesus, and the servants together to show off that miracle and save the wedding from any kind of trouble. Mary saw a chance for the extraordinary to meet the ordinary, and Jesus and the servants brought that to fruition. As we go forth after our celebration with our quote-unquote regular lives, I encourage you to pause every once in a while, look around. Where is the extraordinary trying to break into the ordinary near you? And what can you do to help that spark of extraordinary happen? Keep your eyes open. Maybe, more importantly, keep your imagination open. Because on a day that you might think will be as normal as any other, you may very well be the catalyst for something really remarkable. Amen.